a countdown.
There
So,
it is. And we're live.
okay, it does look like it. And we got like probably a couple of more seconds until we hit the 2 o'clock hour. I'm excited for this discussion. Um, we'll wait. Man, that discussion yesterday was actually pretty cool too.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah. So you know what I gotta do? I really do need to get like a countdown ticker. I see different people with their podcasts doing that. I just don't want to be like everybody else. So we'll see.
Just go for a cold open.
All right, we're at 2 o'clock. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Intellectuals Thought Corner. My name is Angie Card. Today, we are talking about self-awareness, actualization, and this what the societal obligation of each of us may be. To help us with that will help me with this topic. I am joined by my fellow perspective writer, Joel Taft. You know, you got to give somebody with lisp a little credit here, a little leeway. But Joel Teft is joining me to help me develop this discussion. And he wrote a very interesting article, which you can find on my website, www.thethoughtcorner.com. And he really goes into his own personal perspective about this topic. And he reached out and I read it and I'm like, man, we should definitely talk about this because my book actually talks about my journey to self-actualization and some of the realizations that I had to come to get to where I am in my train of thought right now. So, Joel, welcome. And
Thank
thank
you,
you
Angie.
for helping me talk about this topic. And thank you for sending me that article and letting me put it on a thought corner. Before we get into the article, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I guess the short version is I'm a California boy and I've got a family, got three wonderful kids and a wife. You're in our living room right now. We live in a pretty small house, but we love it. And, I would say I'm a pretty intellectually curious person. And so I find myself reading a lot and writing a lot. And so just started doing something publicly. And that's how you and I ended up connecting, just through the professional network of LinkedIn, which I found to provide a lot of really, really supportive and encouraging community members.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to encourage each other there. So it's not like typical social media. I always tell people I don't have social media because I don't really count LinkedIn as social. But yeah, I enjoy the community there, and I think that's a great way to connect with people, and that's certainly how we connected.
You know, I have to agree. Of all the social platforms, LinkedIn really is the one where you can at least have a better shot of getting an intellectual perspective that's not really so emotionally charged and mainstream that you can't really tolerate it or even voice an alternative position without having like a mob of people.
Yeah.
There seems to be a little bit more control on LinkedIn where people are like, oh God, I hate this point, but I'm gonna just be a little bit more, subtle about this. But, on a
Right.
topic of, connecting with people and even actualizing, you and I have had several conversations about this topic. And this is not an echo chamber of thought right now. This is just really, Joel and I are just two normal people that have an interest in this thought. So before we really get into this topic, I want to just kind of make a disclaimer. Joel, are you a psychiatrist?
No, not by a long shot.
Are you a mental health expert?
Nope.
Are you a sociologist?
No, not at all.
Neither am I. So anything in this discussion should not be taken as advice. And if you are having some internal conflicts mentally, we do recommend that you seek the advice of a professional. We are just not those people. So with that out of the way, Joe, we talked about your article. Tell me what your rationale was for writing this article.
Sure. I would say that, like I mentioned before. Writing is something that I've always done, and it's something that I'm trying to do more publicly, mostly as an experiment for myself. It was really just something that I was trying to see if I could even do it, because, surprise, it was really terrifying in many respects to actually put yourself out there and say, hey, this is what I think, and then leave it open for what other people think. And so, as I began to experiment with that and taking what I would say are personal reflections and then putting them out there publicly, that's really where all of my writing comes from. And this particular article really, I think, exemplifies a personal philosophy or personal mindset that I have, which is leave it better than you found it. And, a lot of times that can be more difficult than it sounds, right? It's a cliche or a truism, whatever you want to call it. But when I started to realize that that could actually be a driving philosophy for how you think about life, that's where a lot of my writing comes from. So when you think about leaving something better than you found it, it could literally apply to anything. Certainly relationships, or you think if you had a job, right, you want to leave that company better than you found it. You don't want to be the guy who quits and your manager is thankful. You want to leave situations better than you found them. It could be as simple as driving in traffic. Did you make traffic better for everybody around you? And it seems stupid, but if you think about it, life is mostly the ordinary moments, right? It's rarely those big moments. It's those little moments. And
in connection with your thought of leaving the world better than you found it, you wrote this really, like I said, interesting article. I'm actually going to share my screen so that, as we talk about this article, other people can follow along. And like I said, it is on the Thought Corner. So you are welcome to, can you see that?
It's coming up. There we go.
Sweet. So you are welcome to, okay, there we go. So you are definitely welcome to go into the Thought Corner and read this article for yourself and get your own personal takeaway from it. But we're just going to dive into it just to kind of talk about some of the key points and why it's so important for individuals to at least start thinking about the idea of being self-aware and how that either awareness or lack of impacts society. So, and even your relationships with other people. Because when I read this article, you can definitely take it from a societal standpoint, but it seems like you're very focused. It seems like you can narrow it down to relationships with other people, is what I was kind of reading as well. Like more intimate relationships as well. So let's kind of go into that. You talked about what is the value. You start the article off with posing the question, what is the value of self-awareness? And I wanted to kind of get your take on that particular development of that question.
Sure. Well, there's such a massive amount of content out there in our society right now about self-improvement, self-help. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And when you think about anybody contributing to that space, and this, I believe, fits squarely in that space, or at least it could, I always approach that with a bit of skepticism, simply because a lot of that can just be really, really narrowly applied, or it can be really, really fluffy and hit you in a very emotional place, and it seems to resonate. But then the question is, well, what do I actually do with that? And so when I write, I try to approach it as if I'm talking to myself and I'm trying to solve some kind of a problem. I'm trying to work something out. And so hopefully, when you start at the beginning, you're getting a feel with those questions as to where this is going to go, what we're going to try to unpack, as if it's sort of inviting you along on a journey. The idea of self-awareness can really, I think, mirror, and often does, self-improvement and self-help. And I'm for those things, absolutely. But I think there's a lot of watering down of the potential of when you really are trying to figure out how to make more meaningful contributions and try to figure out, hey, what is my life about? What am I about? And how do I go about figuring that out? And I think it's exercises like this that can help us do that. That's why I try to keep it short.
So let's go into so you talk about self-awareness. I focus a lot on the self-actualization, the act of actually actualizing yourself and your potentials, tapping into yourself. So, it's pretty relative. And so a definition that I see broadly used is self-actualization awareness is the realization or fulfillment of one's talents and potential, especially considered as drive or need present in everyone. And so then you kind of go into that definition of self-awareness and actualization, and it automatically take you into Maslow and those hierarchy of needs that he wrote about that and studied, that he felt that, every human being, really needs in order to be fulfilled. And at the very top of that hierarchy of needs is self-actualization, self-awareness. And so, Maslow, I thought it was very interesting that he put the individual at the very top of that model. And it makes sense, because how can you help someone else? How can you make someone else aware if you yourself have not gotten there yourself? And it kind of reminds me of a lot of modern day activists. I look at a lot of these individuals and they say, okay, yes, you could be very compassionate about someone else's issues, but have you reconciled your own? And I think that in society today, we are, experiencing a lot of individuals who have not reconciled their own struggles and their own problems. They have not actualized themselves, and yet they're going into society and they're promoting problems and issues, for someone else. And so when we go back to your article, and you talk about, having, intimate relationships, and even, having this sense of obligation to society, how is that self-awareness aspect more powerful?
So when I think of an intimate relationship, I always think of the marriage relationship, although it's not only that. Of course, I've had very close friends as well, still do. I remember, I've been married for 11 years now, and I remember when we first got married, those first 5 years are really, really tough. You're learning how to live with another person who turns out is just as selfish as you are, and you get to share that together. And so it gets really, really tough. And you think that a lot of the things that you might have dealt with when you were a single person would go away once you're married. And they just don't. Nothing goes away. I don't know what your experience is with this, but I know for myself, I personally have a tendency to want to, put things under the rug, so to speak, or just to look the other way and pretend maybe it didn't happen, or it's not real, or it's not that big of a deal.
No, I'm not like that. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it and get it reconciled as soon as possible.
Exactly.
I hate lingering feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hate, any type of lingering feelings in relationships, especially ones I want to last.
Right. And, that's something I think that some people certainly have, proclivity for, and it comes a little more naturally. I think for me, it didn't. And so it was a learned reality for me. I brought in that to my marriage. And then, once you start having real conflicts, but never really resolving anything, you have to start asking, well, what's really going on? Right. And then you start to look underneath the surface and you realize, there's these things that in some cases I was aware of them, in many cases I wasn't. Didn't even know that I was doing that, and same with my wife. And so as you begin to go inward and you begin to look for ways to figure out, hey, why am I doing this? Like, where does this even come from? Because if you were to ask me rationally, I wouldn't behave this way, but I am behaving this way. So what's going on? And it's that questioning yourself, right? And then seeing what kind of answers come up. I think until you really have a practice of doing that, it's really, really tough to be in an intimate relationship. And you can see that headline there on your screen. I almost didn't write that because it's so strong and almost kind of abrasive. A person isn't fit to be in an intimate relationship. Like, who am I to say that?
But, I actually agree with that point, though, because, I live by the code that, I have a lot of friends who are single, and, they're constantly looking for a mate. They're constantly looking for somebody that aligns with what they want in a relationship. But when I kind of peel back, my friend, they are not dateable assets for a variety of different reasons. And, I think that, we are in this like society where people can't be straightforward. I feel like the point that you made in that section was very straightforward and it's real. You cannot be a valuable member of a union, whether it's a relationship or whatever, if you don't have a sense of how you fit in that union and how your personality, makes that union work.
Right. And that's why, intimate relationship applies to so much more than just marriage. Although I think you have an excellent point. I think a lot of people who are single or, whatever, they're looking for someone else. They spend a lot of time looking for the right person instead of focusing on being the right person, somebody that would attract the right kind of people. And it's a weird sort of inversion, and it's really tough. And even married, I have seen many friends of mine who are in marriages, but there's no real drive to be the kind of person that a partner might want to stay married to. Right, that takes a continual effort, and you just sort of take the other person, the other partner, for granted. That's not how relationships can work. And on a broader scale, that's not really how society works. And so, if you want to zoom out and talk about society or culture, I think that it's important for everyone to live a life of meaningful contribution. The newsletter that I write is called Mostly Useful, which comes from that idea of living a life of meaningful contribution. I'm kind of a goofy person, so my goal in life is to be mostly useful. I can't expect that 100% of the time, but I'm going to try to be useful to everybody around me, whatever that capacity that means. And so if you think culturally or societally, if we're going to be contributors, if we're going to contribute something meaningful, well, you have to start with looking inside and going, what might be preventing that? What are some areas where I'm actually a detractor, right? This isn't something that you can do on accident. You can't be passive about this. I use the example of, a gravitational weight. If you think of a planet, it's like it's pulling stuff towards it, right? Like we all have a gravitational weight in terms of our personalities or how we interact, communicate. And it doesn't matter if you're, extroverted like me, or if you're really, really introverted and quiet, you have a certain kind of weight. And you have a capacity to utilize that for something meaningful. Or,
Do you think that some people have a hard time understanding what that capacity is because of just various experiences that they've had?
What do you mean?
So, I look at, when I look at society today, I look at the bulk of society being comprised of mostly individuals who have not actualized, who have not tapped into their skill, their capability, their potential. They haven't even identified what makes them great, what makes them a valuable contributor of society. And when you think about why some people are able to do that and some people aren't able to do that, I'm trying to, sort of figure out, what do you think, is inhibiting people from being able to actualize in today's society?
I think there's a lot of things. There is certainly something I've noticed that I have been the recipient of, and so I'm very fortunate in that regard. But I think meaningful community. In other words, people in your life who tell you that you can. Some people have a very strong inner voice. But I think even people with strong inner voices still require somebody else encouraging them, somebody else telling them, yes, you can do this. Yes, there is more for you. There is higher potential for yourself. And kind of like a coach would do, right? If you're trying to do any kind of sport, which I've never really played sports. My wife has played a lot of sports. And when we talk, it's very much that coaching mentality that resonates with people. If there's an encouragement, but there's also a standard to live into, to live up to, and to achieve. Many people, I think, get stuck, if we're going to talk about Maslow, they get stuck in that middle part of the pyramid. And the reason is, I think, by just our biology, the way we're designed, the way that just society is built, we want comfort, we want security, we want belonging, we want things to be taken care of, right? And if we can achieve those things, the basics, if you will, there's not much impetus for us to do more than that. In other words, if we have everything that we need that's keeping us secure, comfortable, safe, full, right? We're not going hungry, those kinds of things. Then what is the urge? What's the necessity for more? And that would be the top of the pyramid, right? The self-actualization. But if that isn't something that we're required to do in order to function, right? I can live my life without ever having to push into that hierarchy any further. And you don't have anybody else telling you that you can, or maybe that you should, then really, what else do you expect? I mean, I think that's exactly what you would expect from people. In fact, I think it's miraculous when people do push further. And really, that's a lot of why I write the way that I do it, is to try to be encouraging. Like, hey, maybe somebody doesn't have that voice in their life, and it's an incredibly important voice. I know that's kind of my rough take on it, but that's at least what I've observed.
And you made a point, and I want to pull up a quote that Ronald Reagan was quoted as saying, because I think it's very important, when he was talking about the idea of socialism. And he said, socialists ignore the side of man that is the spirit. They can provide you shelter, fill your belly with bacon and beans, treat you when you are ill, all the things guaranteed to a prisoner or a slave. They don't understand that we also have dreams. So do you think that today's societies, the act of dreaming is being inhibited by different societal factors, and that's why we're dealing with the types of individuals who are not being able to self-actualize like we are?
I sometimes wonder if dreaming is misdirected in our society. One of the very transformative movies for me was Fight Club, which I know many young men resonated with that movie. I actually went and read the book because it's actually a vehicle for a pretty interesting philosophy. If you read past the violence and the brutality of it, the author was trying to say something about specifically young men in our society. And there's one pivotal scene where Brad Pitt's character, Tyler Durden, is saying, we were all told that we would be movie stars and rock gods, and we're not, and we're very, very pissed off about it. And that hit me because there is a sense in which, unless you can achieve that highest level of contribution in society, you're not really actually contributing. But what's the reality? Most of us are never going to be at that level. But when we think about dreams, again, speaking for myself, I think of achieving that highest level of society when I realized that wasn't something that was even worth aiming for, because it's not who I am. It's not who I'm supposed to be. It reshapes your dreams and allows you to put energy behind something that you can achieve. And I think that many people...
You made a really good point about that. I actually caught a clip of a recent show that Oprah did, and she was interviewing this author, and she said exactly what you said, that some people dream of being rock stars. They dream of being all these delusions of grandeur that they think that society
exactly
wants them to be, so
right.
They're driving all of their goals and their ambitions off of societal expectations of
right.
them, when really, in a realistic way, that's not your path. You're not supposed to be Beyonce. You're not supposed to be LeBron. You're not supposed to be, Tim Cook. You're not supposed to be Bill Gates. You're not supposed to be these people. You're not supposed to be Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those people are supposed to be what they were supposed to be, because they actualized themselves in the way that was organic to them, while also, working with other people to build themselves, so they tapped into all of the layers of the Maslowian pyramid in order to become what they are. You think about these individuals that we, admire so much for their success. These are actualized people, what I mean? But why aren't there a million Bill Gates running around here, right? Because a million people aren't actualizing themselves like Bill Gates have. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I feel
Right.
like some people have a natural ability to actualize if they are able to do it in an environment that promotes that. And so that sort of gets me to the next layer of this discussion, which is the inhibitors of actualization. Because, you know, we talk about what people are going through as they're trying to find themselves, you know, those characteristics that these people have, and, you know, what they're constantly thinking and feeling, you know. But, you know, let's go into some of the inhibitors, because I'll give my story. For example, you know, as a Black American, I want to say, I got to get away from Black American because I hate that term. I'm an African descent American. Okay. So as an African American person, you know, I feel like it is almost impossible for any Black person in this nation to be able to actualize to the extent that an individual like you would be able to, because when you think about the critical theories that impact individuals, and honestly, let me take that back, because critical theory actually impacts the psychology and the actualization of whites as well, in my opinion. Because when you are trying to condition people to believe that they're an oppressor in society, and then on the other side, I am the oppressed in the society. And then what you do is you add these critical theories into the education space, into all the major institutions. You know, I feel like if I was not hyper aware of the impacts of critical theories and how they inhibit self-actualization, and actually bought into them, I don't think that I would be in the mindset that I am today. And so when you think about some of the societal influences, you know, what are your thoughts about, you know, some of the inhibitors?
Everybody has different inhibitors. And I think one of the reasons why self-awareness is so important is that you need to recognize that yours are going to be very, very different than somebody else's. And that isn't a dismissal of what somebody else went through. So you brought up, you know, the issue of race. Right, you and I have very, very different experiences simply because of race or even gender. Right, there's things that are going to hit us differently. But I think the danger is when we assume that somebody had it differently, that also means that we had it easier. I would say it means that we had life differently hard, not the same hard. And it isn't a disrespect of whatever you went through any more than it's a dismissal of what I went through. It's an admission that we both went through things that were hard for us where we were at. And I think the real difference for people who are trying to self-actualize is what you do with those obstacles. Yes. Because you can't do something with them. I mean, again, this is not ever intended to victim blame. And so I have to be very, very careful, because this isn't something to say, it's like, well, you know, yeah, something bad happened to you, but
victim shaming is almost just a popular label at this point. I think any reasonable person would say that you should never shame a victim at all. Right. But at the same time, everyone wants to be a victim. And for some of those people, you know, there is a shame in victimhood if you are a victim of someone else's reality.
Sure. And I think that, again, I'll just use myself for an example because that's safer. But, you know, if there's something that's happened to me that was unfair.
Don't worry, Joel, you're not a racist. Nobody says, forget critical race, man. We know you're not a racist, dude.
No, I appreciate that. But, it's just, I like to use myself as an example because people are so diverse. It's hard to, you know, kind of pick at somebody else's experience and say, well, this might have happened or whatever. But I think, you know, for myself, it's like, well, okay, something happened. And it's not fair. It's unjust. Whatever you want to say, it was not right. Well, okay, that it happened, and you have to admit that it happened. And I have gone to therapy, and I think people should go to therapy. If it's something you can't deal with, you should go. I mean, you've got to deal with this stuff because it doesn't go away, like we discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to if you're continually stuck at that point, you have to start asking yourself, you know, what might actually be happening. So back to self-awareness, and you're starting to reflect on what actually might be going on. In certain cases for myself, I realized I was just feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling sorry that something happened. I was feeling sorry that I was powerless in that moment. But the reality is that the more I felt sorry for myself about, and how powerless I felt in that moment, it carried over into more moments than were necessary. So I continued to be powerless over a situation that didn't need to be true anymore. And once you realize that you have control, isn't the right word, but maybe autonomy, maybe you have power over your own life to do different things if you want to, you begin to push into that. Well, the interesting thing is the more that you do that, the more that you begin to see opportunities arrive elsewhere where you thought maybe doors were closed or things were shut off to you. You begin to develop courage. You begin to develop some fortitude. And that isn't something that I see a lot. I'm a millennial, and I don't see, growing up, I didn't see a lot of
you got to get it right, Joel. We are not just any millennial. We are older millennial.
Well, that's true.
I'm on the older side. I feel like we can come to rationality a lot quicker than the newer millennials. Like, we got to help them.
Right. Well, and I think that a big thing that's missing is that, again, that a voice of like, look, you need to develop a backbone. You're gonna have to suck it up, and in a compassionate way. Again, that's why I try to write from a compassionate or kind perspective. But look, life is hard. I mean, halfway through the article, I talk about that. Life is tragic. It's mostly tragic. I believe that. I think that if you've done any sort of self-journaling or whatever, if you've gone to therapy and they make you think of your childhood or think of these memories, it's like, I forget what the ratio is, but it's like 7 bad memories to 1 positive one or something like that. And I remember talking to my therapist and saying, why is only when I remember bad? I didn't have an awful life. And it's just the way our brains work. We hold on to those negative themes much more easily than we hold on to positive themes. And so I think those things, if an over focus on the negative, can prevent us from realizing that doesn't have to be the next reality that you enter into. In other words, you have more authority over your own life. You have the ability to self-educate. You have the ability to put your art out there. You have the ability to go get a different job that you might not feel qualified for. What's the worst that's going to happen? And fear plays a big role in that, keeping us from stepping out of those boundaries.
That is a really good point. Fear is definitely, I feel like, one of the biggest inhibitors. I do feel like critical theories is definitely an inhibitor for people. But I also think that people not tapping into themselves and understanding what their reoccurring talents are too, that inhibits people as well. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm gonna talk about your experience with actualizing, and then we're going to talk about my experiences, just so people can kind of understand the journeys of real people. So do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Sure, go for it.
Ladies first? Okay. So, such a gentleman. Okay, so we need more of them in the world today. I think they're lacking. I'll be honest with you. So I've been writing this book about my journey. And my journey actually started in 2020, but I think it started even before then. I think I'm 38 years old, and I think for the first 37 years of my life, I can honestly say that I functioned with a lot of dissonance. There would be the societal ideas about me as a Black woman in America. There'd be those ideas about what my limitations are in society, and what my reality was, a huge focus on the history of a negative history of my culture. And, I feel like those things have always, been sort of the pebble in my shoe, and being able to get to this point of feeling, I've identified my reoccurring skills, and I'm not afraid to use them and leverage them for success. And, even down to my mom, bless her heart, she always told me, you have 2 strikes in this country. You're Black and you're a woman. So you have to work extra hard. You have to follow the Black blueprint of success in America. And I always contended, even I went to an 82% white male school. So I know the idea of being an elephant in a room. I never felt like an elephant in a room. And, even though I was supposed to, I just never did, because it was like, okay, well, if you guys are the cream of the crop in society, let's see how we match wits. So I've always taken a competitive disposition to these arguments about how I should be actualizing my mind. And I think that, as I sat back and continued to look at the narratives, listen to the arguments, experience life, I realized that number one, communications, writing, influencing people with my writing and communication skills was a reoccurring asset throughout my life. I always did really well in school with communications and writing. I've always done really well in almost any aspect of my life, business or school education. So I realized that was a reoccurring talent of mine. But to understand that talent from the perspective of I need to hone in, own this, develop it, and make it a fabric of my potential for success I was still kind of disconnected from that. So it wasn't until I started writing unapologetically, and because I feel like I was just sort of revolting against all of these ideas that I was that just kept. I feel like that I was around all my life that just kind of influenced the way that I thought about things all my life. And when 2020 hit, it was almost like being a bottle of fizzy water that somebody's just kept shaking and shaking up. And it's just like, you know what? Psh, actually, I hate all of these ideas. I hate all of these theories about who I am and who I should be and what my place is in society. I've competed with enough individuals that have not looked like me. I've been involved with the careers of enough individuals that did not look like me for me to know that these are lies that I am supposed to believe so that I don't self-actualize. And so that has kind of been my journey, is getting past all of the societal lies and rhetoric about me and how I can actualize in society, and being able to move on to where I'm at today in my thinking.
Right. Wow, that's really powerful. And I actually resonate with a lot of that. So it's so interesting how, you can come from such diverse backgrounds and yet still have, similar conclusions or principles or values. I would say for myself, one of the pivotal moments that always stands out in my mind, I remember, so I've always been a really opinionated person. There's no shortage of opinions. And
are you an ENTP?
ENFJ.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the F is really, really strong with me. It's very much like a feeler. So if you can't tell, but, anyway, I remember I was ranting or something to my dad, and I don't even remember that he said anything. I think he was just letting me talk, which, I think like most people, I don't really know fully what I think until I've said it out loud. And then I kind of hear myself and go, I don't know what I think about that, or I don't maybe agree with what I just said, those kinds of things.
Right.
And it was one of those moments where I was just talking out loud, and I was complaining about a community we were a part of and how people were behaving, and all the backstabbing and just typical behavior when people are get together. It's what happens. Anyway, and I remember hearing myself, and then that voice in my head just said, you're exactly part of the problem. You're just as hypocritical as everybody that you're complaining about. Right. And it was just that little light bulb moment. I remember walking away from that. I'm giving my dad credit because he probably did say something. I just don't remember what it was. But I remember walking away from that being kind of hit over the head with the idea that, oh, wow, I was actually part of the problem. So then again, if you're going to have these opinions, you need to start asking yourself, well, if I'm part of the problem, how do I switch that into be part of the solution? Right. How do I, what do I do? And there's no real single blueprint for that. I think it's something that you have to do day after day. It's a step-by-step kind of thing that you're pushing into. But again, just to, I guess, answer the main question, which was, my own journey for self-actualization. I do not have an education. I didn't go to college or university or anything like that after school. I just went straight to work. And so I have grown up as a young adult and now an actual adult, an elder millennial. I have grown up with a chip on my shoulder because I think, relatively intelligent and curious and open-minded and all of the things that are hallmarks of somebody with an education, at least you would expect. And that lack of an education has prevented me, I think, in my mind from doing the things that I thought maybe I should do more of, or thought maybe that I was capable of. And genuinely, it was through the encouragement of my wife, the person I'm married to, who has been a huge voice in my life to say, look, this isn't what matters. What matters is what you feel like you ought to do and what you feel like you're capable of doing, and go for it. Like, if you think that you're going to apply for a job that you want, so what if you're not fully qualified with the education component? They'll tell you if you're not qualified, go on your experience and see what happens. And it's interesting that what happens
is part of that fear you were talking about.
Yeah, if you step outside of that fear, it's pretty amazing what happens. And so we sort of developed this kind of back and forth. The first thing that we say is whenever we're getting opinionated, whenever we're talking about doing something, or those kind of really, really judgy kind of conversations, we'll look at each other and one of us will say, well, don't talk about it, be about it. Like, if you're going to sit here and complain about it, like, go do something about it. And like, if you don't like your job, go get a better one. And then
I had this security guard in my high school. He used to always tell us, don't think about it, just do it. Get like Nike, just do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's some wisdom in that. It's really simple, but there's a lot of wisdom in that. And, then then of course the natural answer is like, okay, if I'm going to be about it, that's really scary. Then we started asking each other, well, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And then if you find yourself doing that thing, whatever the answer to that question is, it's pretty incredible. I can't really think of anything that really didn't work out that well. I mean, things were tough, but life is tough. Anything worth doing is going to be tough.
Right.
And it's scary. But again, once you learn and develop a habit of facing that fear and living in it, and just living in it, you can't run away from it once you step out, And
we talked, to your point, we talked about this yesterday. And, I just, this is just fun playing with theories, right? And we were talking about, quantum theory and how some people believe that, there are these alternate universes, and within these alternate universes, there are all these different versions of ourselves that's either better or worse than we are in the reality that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. And, to me, when I hear those arguments, they're always kind of making it seem like it's a physical thing. Like, there's parallel universes, and, you can't really cross these universes and meet your doppelganger. And it's kind of like, when I look at those arguments, I'm like, what if this is not a physical thing? Like, what if we're not talking about physics? What if we're talking about just fundamental decision making? When every time you change your decision, your reality becomes different. It's kind of like you said, what if you went out on the limb and applied for that job that you felt like you weren't qualified, but you had the character to do it and you could sell it and you got it, right? Then you got this job and now you change your reality because now you're in that space that you wanted to be. Maybe your income is different. When your income is different, your reality changes anyways, because you can buy the things that you want to buy. You can do the things that you want to do. But if you're a person that's sort of stuck in this fear reality that because I look a certain way or because I don't meet the standards of this particular, area, I cannot be in those areas. I cannot actualize myself to that potential. But, that's very counterproductive when you think about it, because, if we got a lot of people running on fear, that means there's a lot of people that's not actualizing themselves and changing their realities. And now they feel like they're stuck in this reality, that they feel like something else has created, when really it's because their mind has not made a decision to get out of that reality, do something different, and create a new reality for themselves. What do you think? I know that's like some crazy sci-fi stuff, but that's how I think. I really do think that, parallel universes is not about physics. It's about mental, it's about psychology and decision making. It's like any rags to riches story. If you have somebody who's in poverty, right? And some people in poverty have the sense to know that, okay, I need to do something. I don't want to be in this reality. They know they don't want to be in that reality. And so you see a lot of the rags to riches stories of people who decide to step out of what they should be doing or what they're expected to do, and they just do something different. It works out for them, and then all of a sudden their reality is changed.
Right.
So,
right.
So, when you think about that, do you think that like it's fair to say that, self-actualization is really just, it ties into this quantum physics idea of parallel universes just by simply someone changing. If you change your decisions, you change your mind about your reality, you change your reality. Is it too simple?
Well, I mean, I think you have to take something complex like that and make it down into simpler parts. I mean, it's not simple by any stretch of the imagination, but I would say, I think from my perspective, I haven't looked too much into quantum physics. Or the idea of, alternate realities or multiple realities, although I'm familiar with the theory. I think my own theory would be, and again, I'm just a goofball from a small town in California. Like, I don't know anything, but I'd say my experience has led me to believe that people have unlimited potential. I mean, you have the capacity. I would like to think of people like a balloon, right? If you blow into a balloon, it's full, but is it as full as it could be? It's like, no, you could add more air and you could continue to increase the capacity of that balloon. And so I think people are very similar in that, what I'm doing today at 34, like I said, I have a career, married at 11 years, I have 3 kids. I have friends who have asked me, it's like, well, how do you do it? I don't know. You just do it. Like, how do you raise kids? Like, you just do. Like, there's your capacity changes.
The decision to make whatever decisions you have to make those situations work.
What are your options, right? So something like that makes it really, it makes it really binary in that particular example. Yeah. But I think that applies to other things too. And so I think if you haven't pushed into those other potential realities, I think that largely lies with the individual. But again, it goes back to, I think, the idea of self-awareness. You have to tell yourself the truth. Reality is largely perception, and I think we can agree that, there is of course absolute truth. I don't dismiss that, but in terms of how we exist, there is a reality that exists, and it's largely based on how you perceive that reality to be. And if you want that reality to change, you have to change your perceptions. You have to change your thinking, and that isn't a flipping of a switch. It's a journey, and it's a long one. And I think, unfortunately, the mentality that we encourage in the society leads people to think that it's a short, vacation. It's like a weekender. And it's like, no, this thing takes years.
Yeah, I'm going to take a seminar, and then I'm going to actualize myself, and then I'm going to be all right to be able to contribute to society in a meaningful way.
No, you're just going to get hopped up on endorphins and caffeine, and you're going to have something that maybe is a catalyst, but it's not true transformation. It's not true change. And so I think once you start to, it starts by looking inside, and it's tough. It's tough, man, to look inside, because there's some garbage there, right? There's some garbage as well. Some of them are things that you've done, and some of them are things that have been done to you. But there's also a lot of positive potential. And when you really look inside and you begin to tell yourself the truth. So, for example, say I'm, I'll just take myself, right? Like I'm writing. I don't expect or even desire to write at some international level. I don't want one of the big publishing houses to grab my work and turn me into whatever. This isn't my climbing any sort of ladder to get to whatever that is. Even I don't even know what that means. Like,
right.
But I'm looking at myself and go, well, similar to how you felt, like it seems that people are influenced in a positive way by what I write. What if I did that and I was able to positively impact one person one day a week? that's a meaningful contribution to me. But I couldn't do that if I didn't first look inside and go, well, first, what am I supposed to do? And then tell myself the truth about what that meant at the level that it's supposed to happen. And then to actually step out of that fear that was preventing me from doing it, because it is scary, step into that and say, look, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to be open to how other people are receiving what I have to say. And I'm going to go from there and see what happens. And there's no real future plan. It's just looking at reality and trying to say and see it for what it really is.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're coming up on the hour, but I want to say this, and then I want to conclude with your article, because to piggyback on what your thought was, I think that you have an excerpt from your article that I feel like really sort of drives the point home about, self-awareness and, what that obligation is to people, and, and how you become more meaningful to them. And it's actually a passage that I will be using in my book, because I think that, it's very, very relevant. And I don't know if it was in the closing. And you just made that point. This is the point you just made right here, which I love, but it was, it was about, I think I might have lost it. Okay, here we go. I like this part right here. Because it talks about what you said, and I'm sorry for that, but and you mentioned it about telling the truth to yourself, and I don't think I think I missed my point here when I was when you embrace your unique story along with the good with the bad. You must tell yourself the truth. I love that part. But there was another one about really the outcome. And I think my perspective on my screen is a little bit weird, but it was talking about the outcome. And I think it's a little bit further down in the article where it talks about how you become more meaningful to society when you come to your own level of self-actualization. You're able to deal with people with more empathy. You're able to deal with people with more rationality. And I think that's a very, very important point that I think people need to be hyper aware of, that if you are not a self-actualized person, you are not going to be able to respond to the issues of other people's or the struggles of other people with the level of rational understanding that is necessary to truly help them.
Right.
And
well, I think you.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, after you.
No, I wanted you to expand on that point, because it was really, I thought that was just an impactful point in your article, that people really need to understand that when we talk about self-actualization awareness from a societal obligation standpoint, people need to understand that you can't really put the cart before the horse. Maslow didn't say, other people and then yourself. He said, actualize yourself, be aware of yourself, and in turn, you'll be able to meet all of these societal obligations, with the level of limitless and rationality that, a person that's fully actualized would have.
Right. And I think the idea that, at least for me, where that came from is being in positions of leadership. I very quickly figured out, whenever I've had to lead and people, I very figured out you can only really take people where you've been yourself. So when people are depending on you, if you haven't gone somewhere, it's like hard to lead them there. I mean, you can figure some things out, but even the idea of having a vision, seeing something that others can't see, but pointing them towards that, you've gone there mentally, emotionally. So in a sense, you're leading people into something that you've seen, even if you haven't experienced it as a reality. And I think that when we talk about self-actualization and our societal obligation, I think when you're looking inward and you're really doing that necessary inward work, once you begin to orient yourself and discipline yourself and lead yourself, you realize that the point of your life isn't really about you, it's about other people. I think that's maturity, is when you're really looking out for the needs of other people. And you can't do that unless you start at the beginning, which is that self-leadership, that self-awareness. And so at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned activism. I'm all for people taking their stand in a free society and making their opinions known. And I would push that further. I would say, if you have an opinion, that's great. Don't talk about it, be about it. Go get involved at whatever your opinion is. And it isn't about whether or not, I would agree with that opinion. That's not the point. The point is that you take the necessary movement to go and be a part of making things better, make a meaningful contribution to whatever community that you're a part of. Unfortunately, it's far too easy to have opinions, to share opinions, and to not be involved at all. And those aren't useful emotions. That's not a useful or helpful situation to put yourself or other people in. In other words, you're just sort of adding to the noise when you do that. What I would encourage people to do, and what I try to do, is to make yourself available to other people. Whatever situation it is, your own experiences are going to enable you to be specifically helpful to somebody in your life, and you may not even know it. But I know that, again, I mentioned, the example of marriage. It's really, really hard. And in those early years, you need a lot of support. But if you think about the idea of the marriage ceremony, I mean, how much money and time is spent on the party, right? Like, we have this huge celebration, we have this huge party, we have this huge event, and then everybody goes home, and then it's like two people are like left to figure it out. Well, the idea of a marriage community is that, or a marriage ceremony, is that you're inviting people to stand with you and say, hey, this is hard and I'm going to need help eventually. And,
Right.
and it's not going to take long. I'm going to need help. And the idea of the community being there is that they're saying, we're going to be there for you. And so, in my own life, when our marriage got really, really hard and we weren't sure, what was going to happen next, the way that I think a big part of the way we were able to succeed was we had a few people come alongside of us, put their arms around our shoulders and say, hey, us too. And you go, what? Like, you guys went through, like, you just feel like you were experiencing something so isolating, and come to find out you were experiencing something that is actually pretty common. And that's just one example, but I think that it's important to be the kind of person who is available for those kinds of situations, so that you can, down the road, make yourself available to somebody else who's going to be in that same situation and is going to need that help. But if you haven't done that upfront work, you can't make yourself available. There's no way you're going to do that. It just isn't possible. It's not possible. I think, something else that's been
I agree. It kind of goes back to back in the day. RuPaul had this talk show, and he would always end it, or I'm sorry, I don't want to be gender not sensitive, but RuPaul would always say, if you don't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And right. Those words have always stuck with me. I thought it was a great closing tag, because it really did emphasize the need to love yourself, be aware of yourself before you can contribute to other people. And, it's kind of like I was telling you about some of my guy friends,
right.
I have this one guy friend who he dates the same type of girl, like brunettes, tiny, petite, little brunette chicks who all have problems. I think they're like human projects, and every time I meet one or get to know of one, they all have the same issues, and he's recounting, they're just going through stuff, and then the relationship doesn't work out. And then finally, this last one, I'm like, dude, I think that you're messed up. And he's like, what? And I'm like, you keep inheriting, going into these relationships with these females with the same type of problem. You're trying to play therapist at this point, because you are taking on somebody who you may perceive as having more problems than you do, so that you can deflect from working on your own issues. And, right. I think going back to the activists, I wrote about them. I think a lot of the majority of activists, I would say 90% of them are individuals who have not self-actualized at all. And they're literally deflecting their struggles, their issues, their unreconciled trauma or whatever on the issues of other people that they perceive is doing worse off than they are. It's kind of like, you know, to your point of Fight Club, you know, there was another layer of Fight Club that I think that a lot of people miss, and that was the addiction to other people's struggles so that you can deflect from your own. When you think about Edward Norton's character started going to these groups, these support groups, so that he could deflect from his own issues by catering to the issues of people who legitimately had problems.
Right. Yeah. He was exactly what he accused Marla Singer of being. You know, the idea of being a tourist. You know, he was getting the puppet experience of having catharsis, having release, and then being able to sleep. Yeah, there's some deep stuff in that when you think about the idea of, you know, we're a very vicarious society right now. We can watch the TV and we can see all this tragedy and we can see all this horrible stuff going on.
We internalize like, a lot of it to ourselves. And
as if it was happening to us, or
and problems and traumas that we've had.
Right. But you think about it, I mean, again, I'm not athletically inclined. I'm not into sports, but I go to work and, you know, you hear these guys talking about sports and it's like, oh yeah, we didn't do so well today and we're going to get it. And, you know, next weekend or whatever. I'm like, who's we? And then I realize, you know, they're talking about a team that they're following. It's like, bro, you were drinking beer on the couch. Like, who's we? You didn't do anything. I understand you feel really close to your team, and I get it. I'm not a sports guy, so whatever. But you just started thinking, I'm like, you know, it's a lot like that tourist. You're kind of just sitting in the armchair, being all wise towards people, having all these opinions about what you're seeing and all this outrage, but you're not really the one experiencing it. So fine, if you have an opinion about it, man, I'd say get involved. You know, I don't really care much for opinion. I care for people who are actually active, people who are going to get involved and get involved in, let's say, community betterment, community outreach, whatever that means in your local area.
Inspiring people, not burning down businesses. Like, to me, my idea of people getting involved and using their gifts and contributions to help society does not mean destroying society to prove a point. Just so that, you know, our idea of, you know, that everybody knows that, you know, today's activist is unacceptable, in my opinion. I think I think today's activist is a huge indication of the mental health issue that we have in this country. We are over an hour, and Joel, I could probably talk to you all day about this subject. You know, we're both developing projects around this subject, so I look forward to having you back on. Actually, I need you back on, so y'all just remember Joel's face, because, you know, he's a writer on the blog that in terms of his work. I share his stuff on the Thought Corner, and we're definitely going to have him back. And, you know, to close on this topic that we've been talking about, I just want to kind of compare self-awareness actualization to the movie The Last Dragon. Joel and I talked about this, and I think it's a really good comparison and kind of help individuals to understand what we're talking about. Last Dragon was this sort of quirky 80s Black movie. I believe Barry Gordy was part of the production, that followed the story of a Kung Fu master. They were spoofing Kung Fu, right? And so they followed a Black Kung Fu master, Leroy Green, who had pretty much completed his training, and he was trying to, you know, achieve this unlimited power of the glow. And so his master told him that, you know, he would have to find the master in order to unlock this unlimited power. And so Leroy said, well, where do I find the master? And so his master sent him on this sort of, you know, wild little goose chase, only to end at a fortune cookie factor. And he was upset, obviously. and his master never revealed to him where he could find the master. Now, while he's on this self-discovery journey, he has all these issues that's going on, that impacts the individuals that he loves and his community. And so as he is trying to find the master, he selflessly goes on this journey to make sure to help the individuals use his talents and his skills and his capabilities to help these individuals in his community battle against this corporation and the neighborhood, I would say, Kung Fu master, Sho'nuff. So in the end, I don't want to tell the whole movie, but in the end of the movie, the last scene of the movie, we find Leroy and Sho'nuff, his nemesis. They're toe to toe. And in the beginning, Sho'nuff is giving it to Leroy. Like it was like watching a Rocky movie. You know how Rocky just get his ass handed to him for 10 rounds, and then at the end he realized, oh yeah, I'm in a fight, I should probably win. That's kind of how the movie played out in that last thing, where Leroy started reflecting on all the people in his life and all of his experiences. And as he came to that realization, he realized that the master that he was looking for was himself. And he found his power of the glow, and he was able to beat Sho'nuff, and it was a happy ending. And so that's pretty much what this conversation is about, understanding how to unlock the master that is you, by leveraging your skills and your capabilities that you identify can help contribute to society in a meaningful way. And as you continue to do that, you come to this realization about who you are and what your place is in society beyond what anybody else can tell you. And as Joel mentioned, this is a journey. This is not going to a seminar for a couple of hours or a weekend, and now you're like, oh, I'm actualized. It's a journey. It's how you experience life. It impacts how you respond to things that happen around you as a result of how you have defined yourself. So I really do hope that this discussion was useful to the individuals that participated in it today, who caught it on a replay. I really appreciate you tuning in. Catch the next podcast. I'm doing these. I'm launching every 2 weeks right now because I just want to be able to space my everything in life in a balanced way. But catch us on the next podcast. We are going to be talking about beta females. I know some people have been waiting for that topic. We are going to be talking about beta females and how they impact other females out of the workplace and inside. That should be an awesome discussion. Joel, thank you so much. I look forward to revisiting this topic and other topics with you on a Thought Corner. I want to say welcome to the Intellectuals Thought Corner, because it may be times where I'm like, bro, I don't want to do it today. Can you run a show for me? I might have you do that if you open it doing it. You say you're an extrovert, introvert. I think you're extrovert, but we'll get
I'm
you
a big extrovert.
a big extrovert. So we definitely want to see you back, and I appreciate you. And you have a wonderful day, and everyone else, you have a wonderful day as well. Stay blessed. Love your neighbor as yourself, and please, please, please listen to popular rhetoric with your own rationality. I really want people to practice tapping into their own rationality and actually taking everything that they learn from other people or hear from other people with a grain of salt. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye.